You check your phone. The party started 20 minutes ago. You are still ironing your shirt. Somewhere across the city, your titas are doing the exact same thing. Nobody is panicking. Nobody is rushing. This is normal. Outsiders call it Filipino time. They say it like it's a flaw, like your ancestors forgot how clocks work. But the real answer is far stranger. Your relationship with time was never broken. It was built differently, on purpose, by forces that had nothing to do with laziness and everything to do with survival. Start with the clock itself. A clock is not a natural object. Nothing in the jungle ticks in even segments. Nothing in the rice field beeps at 9 a.m. The clock is a machine, imported, colonial, and relatively new to how Filipinos actually lived for thousands of years before it arrived. Before Spanish and American time schedules were stamped onto daily life, time in the archipelago was told by rhythm, not by numbers. The tide told fishermen when to leave. The sun told farmers when to plant. The rain told everyone when to wait. Time was relational. It bent around people, weather, and need. It did not march forward in rigid straight lines the way a clock insists it should. This is where anthropologist Edward T. Hall becomes useful. Hall spent decades studying how different cultures experience time itself, and he split the world into two broad categories. Monochronic cultures treat time like a strict, linear resource. One thing happens, then the next, each slotted into its box. Punctuality becomes a moral virtue. Being late becomes a personal failure. Polychronic cultures work differently. Multiple things happen at once. Relationships matter more than schedules. A conversation with your neighbor is not an interruption to your day. It is your day. The Philippines, shaped by centuries of communal barangay living, tight extended families, and agricultural rhythms, leans heavily polychronic. Time bends to people, not the other way around. So when you're running late because your Lola stopped you at the door to ask if you've eaten, you are not failing at time management. You are participating in a completely different operating system for what time is even for. Here's where it gets stranger. Psychologist Robert Levine spent years measuring the actual walking pace of pedestrians in cities across dozens of countries for his research on the pace of life. He found something counterintuitive. Countries with slower measured walking speeds were not necessarily less productive or less developed. They often had denser social bonds, more communal support, and lower rates of certain stress-related illnesses. Fast pace of life, Levine found, correlated with higher rates of heart disease in several of the cities he studied. Slower was not always behind. Sometimes, slower was healthier. Now think about what Filipino time actually protects. It protects the goodbye that takes 40 minutes because you cannot just leave a Filipino gathering. You have to say bye to every single auntie individually, twice, while she tries to feed you one more thing for the road. It protects the neighbor who stops you mid-errand because she saw you and wants to catch up. And somehow you don't mind, because in this culture, being interrupted by another human being is not rude. It's the whole point. Compare this to industrialized monochronic cultures, where time became money quite literally once the factory clock replaced the church bell as the authority over daily life. Historian E.P. Thompson wrote extensively about this shift in his research on time and industrial discipline in 18th century England, describing how factory owners had to train entire generations of workers to feel guilty about lateness, because pre-industrial laborers simply did not think in synchronized minutes. Guilt about time was manufactured. It was not born into humans, it was installed. Filipinos never fully installed that guilt, because colonization here layered a foreign clock on top of an existing, deeply relational sense of time, rather than replacing it completely. The clock arrived. The old rhythm never left. You inherited both, tangled together, which is why part of you feels bad about being late while another part of you genuinely cannot leave the room without hugging everyone goodbye. There's a psychological name for this tension. Some researchers call it time orientation conflict, the friction that happens when a person operates inside two competing cultural clocks simultaneously. One clock says efficiency, the other says relationship. Guess which one usually wins at a Filipino family reunion? Consider the practical shape this takes today. A meeting called for 2 o'clock might genuinely start at 2:30 And everyone in the room silently agreed to this before it even happened. This isn't chaos. It's an unspoken social contract, a shared understanding that arrival time flexes around traffic, family obligations, and whichever relative needed a favor that morning. And traffic itself deserves a mention because Metro Manila's congestion is not folklore. It is one of the most severe in Southeast Asia by multiple transportation studies, meaning that being 15 minutes late might genuinely be the fastest anyone could have physically arrived. Filipino time absorbed the unpredictability of the roads the same way it absorbed the unpredictability of the tides centuries earlier. The culture didn't create chaos, it adapted around it. Here's the twist that reframes everything. Filipino time is often mocked as a flaw in comparison to Western punctuality. But punctuality culture has its own quiet cost. Levine's research also found that in cities obsessed with the clock, strangers were measurably less likely to stop and help someone in need. Less likely to pause, less likely to notice another human being struggling in front of them. The tighter people gripped the clock, the looser their grip became on each other. Filipino time flips that trade entirely. You lose minutes. You gain people. Every late arrival carries an invisible ledger of small human moments. A conversation, a shared meal, a hug that wasn't scheduled but happened anyway. So the question was never really why Filipinos are late. The real question is what kind of time is actually worth keeping. A clock counts seconds. It does not count how loved someone felt in the middle of your errand when you stopped to talk to them. It does not count the plate of food your tita insisted you bring home. It does not count the version of you that exists more fully in relationship than in schedule. Tonight, when you're running behind because someone needed 5 more minutes of your attention, you won't need to apologize the way you used to. You'll understand what your body already knew before you had the words for it. You never lost time. You just spent it on something a clock was never built to measure.